It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. And we start our news today on the foreign scene. This is as United States President Donald Trump has announced that Venezuela will turn over between 30 and 50 million barrels of sanctioned oil. Trump said the oil held in storage due to Washington's embargo on Venezuela exports would be sold at market prices and that he would control the resulting revenues to ensure the money is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. Trump added that he had directed his Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, to execute the plan immediately. Now, what does this mean for Nigeria, as the 58.18 trillion naira in the 2026 budget is anchored on a $64.85 per barrel crude oil benchmark? And this faces mounting pressure as Trump's intervention in Venezuela threatens to unleash a flood of new crude supplies onto an already oversupplied global market. Nigeria's 2026 budget may be the first casualty as Trump signals a Venezuelan crude comeback. Now we bring the conversation back home, as former President Goodluck Jonathan has said he feels a great sense of satisfaction knowing that the People's Democratic Party, PDP, is still alive, strong and resilient. This is despite defections from the party to the All Progressives Congress, APC. Jonathan reaffirmed the PDP remained a fundamental pillar of Nigeria's democracy, being the only surviving one among the legacy political parties since 1998. The former president made the remarks while receiving members of PDP National Working Committee, led by National Chairman Dr. Kabiru Turaki San, during a high-level consultative meeting held at his private office in Abuja yesterday. The meeting focused on the party's reconciliation process and strategic repositioning ahead of the 2027 general election. Jonathan stated that PDP possessed the historical resilience and institutional strength required to overcome its current internal challenges, describing the party as more than a political platform, but a national institution. While still staying in political developments, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar yesterday declared that he will not step aside for any contender within the African Democratic Congress, insisting that all qualified aspirants will be subjected to an open, transparent and competitive process as the party prepares for the 2027 presidential election. The former vice president made the declarations in a statement by his spokesman, Paul Ibe, insisting that a credible democratic system cannot survive without strong and viable opposition parties. Atiku also warned that Nigeria's democracy was under severe strain, arguing that the opposition was facing an existential threat amid what he described as deliberate attempts to weaken alternative political platforms. He further alleged that agents of President Bola Tinubu were bent on destabilizing the ADC through internal interference and manipulation. This is a move that he said was designed to distract the party and undermine its cohesion ahead of the electoral contest. Well, in a different development, the Apex Northern Socio-Cultural Organization Arewa Consultative Forum has disclosed that it will not endorse any candidate in the 2027 presidential election. Speaking in Kaduna, ACF National Publicity Secretary Professor T.A. Mohammed Baba said the presidential hopefuls would be asked to disclose plans on how they intend to tackle the challenges of insecurity and poverty in the northern region. Mohammed Baba said just like in the 2023 presidential elections, the forum will invite all the aspirants or candidates to come and explain how each aspirant will tackle the issues of insecurity and poverty, among other issues affecting the northern region, if elected to the presidential office in the 2027 polls. Well, ACF further stated that the forum would also prepare a position paper on the north and present the document to the winner of the 2027 presidential election on how to tackle the challenges facing the region. And now we go straight into security news as soldiers of Operation Hadinkai have arrested 8 additional suspects in connection with the recent suicide bombing at a mosque in Maiduguri, Borno State. This came barely 3 days after the alleged mastermind of the attack, identified as Sharif Umar, was arrested by troops in the state capital. The suicide attack occurred on December 24, 2025, when a bomber detonated an improvised explosive device inside a mosque at the Gamboru Market, Maiduguri, which killed at least 5 worshippers and left 35 others injured. In a statement, the media information officer of Operation Hadinkai, Sani Uba, said the latest arrests were made during an operation in the Yalemu area of Mubi South local government area of Adamawa State. Well, that is what we have from security. A lot of politics to discuss. And of course, we continue to see the fallout from the invasion, capture, whatever you want to call it, of Venezuela and how it impacts oil-dependent economies such as our own.
Okay, so Trump has now said, let's go ahead and continue to loot Venezuelan resource because these were oil supplies already loaded. But once they had a blockade, they were able to corner this oil. And because of that, that batch of oil could not be taken out of the country. About 30 to 50 million barrels, isn't it? Sale price about 2 billion. Analysts have looked at it. Yeah, the first implication of Nigeria, I don't think anything will really happen to our benchmark. We have about $64 per barrel. Oil will still hover around the $50 to $60 mark this year. So, I mean, a little over $60 mark. I don't think it's going to add a lot of panic to the market because at least when it's been sold, the effect will be, can I use the word very tepid? Because 50 million barrels will not be enough to be able to glut the ecosystem. It's not going to cause a massive glut. I mean, when you look at it, I think it was President Biden the other time, a couple of years ago, when he released about 180 million barrels. What came out of that? I think maybe it was just a 12 or 31 cent increase. So there's nothing really to be frazzled about. I mean, short, medium term, maybe slight surges in price here and there, or slight reduction in prices here and there. And maybe long to medium term, nothing really will be the order of the day. But I think what we should be more scared of is the fact that this has now emboldened President Trump to be able to go overboard. Now he's talking about Greenland. And while we're talking about Europe being responsive to the threats of Trump, now that he had talked about Greenland, which is a sovereign under Denmark, a fellow NATO member, and I'm sure Europe now is now getting judged that they have to even issue out a statement. So that's why you do not embolden dictators. And it's sad that one day will come where I'll be able to talk about the leader of the free world being dictatorial in his tendency and a dictator. Because that's all he's doing. But when you also look historically, there's nothing Trump is doing that is different from what America has always done. Kennedy was known as a poster boy for democracy, as sort of like glorified Kennedy was. Kennedy did the same. Don't forget the Bay of Pig invasion, but it was not successful because Fidel Castro fought back. And in fact, it was after that attempt at the Bay of Pig invasion to be able to overthrow Cuba. That was when, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, when Khrushchev did get his missile into Cuba as a deterrent to America before they finally agreed and Khrushchev took the missile and they said they were not going to invade Cuba again. But anyway, Trump is talking about that today. As regards the ADC, yes, Atiku Abubakar has a right to be able to talk tough and say, yes, it's not going to step down for anyone. It's going to be a fair contest. But I think that conversation about a fair contest will be what will implode the ADC. Because you have something that is sort of going to be the night of long knives, where everybody wants to be part of that process. Everybody wants to emerge. We know Amechi is planning. We know Atiku Abubakar is planning. We know Peter Obi is in the fray. And there are a couple of more people that will join them. And all of them will not get the ticket. It is one person that will get the ticket. But all of them want to be on the ballot one way or the other. Take, for instance, a lot of the supporters of Peter Obi are saying it's presidency or nothing for them. It's presidential ticket. So if they do not get that, then definitely they will have to pitch their tent elsewhere. And that's why, I don't agree with Boala and everything, but I might have to agree with him. It was said that his said in the podcast that Peter Obi will probably seek a ticket somewhere else. I think in an event where he doesn't get the ADC ticket. And I subscribe to that because the truth has to be said. All of these guys want to be on the ticket. And it might be their own albatross. And I do not see the remote possibility of them coming together or working together. Even Kwankwaso was saying the other day that any deal he's going to do is going to be based on, if anybody can give me a presidential ticket or a vice presidential ticket. I think there was one story on insecurity.
Yes, arrest of 8 suspects for the bombing in
yes,
Maiduguri.
I would like to give kudos, to the authorities as regards that. We'd like to encourage them to do more, and we're thankful for their service. But also, I would like to also quickly give kudos, to President Tinubu. I think I saw a story making around that the first female DG of the Nigerian Law School, has been appointed by President Tinubu. And I think that's another great milestone for President Tinubu as it goes on this one. I'll yield the floor because of time.
Okay, there isn't always enough time, but I would like to deal with all the topics, and I hope those in the background will allow me to do so. Now, it's as follows. Let's start with Trump and Venezuela. Already an agreement has been reached between the United States and Venezuela on the turning over to the United States between 30 million to 50 million barrels of crude oil. Now, what are these barrels of crude oil, these vessels being talked about? These are the vessels, the sanctioned crude oil vessels that the American government seized in December, including vessels meant for China. And that is a red flag there. Would this constitute another major issue with China saying that it stands by its agreement with the government of Venezuela? However, the government of the United States has given Desi Rodriguez, instruction that she must cooperate. And she says already that she will cooperate. And she will give total access to American oil companies to take over all those seized vessels. When those boats and vessels were being seized, America said they were carrying sanctioned cargo. But at the end of the day, 35 attacks, 100 people died. Now America saying it wants to take the oil, is going to take blood-soaked oil. Now the value is put at about $2 billion. And President Trump says the proceeds, the output will be sold at market price. And he, Donald J. Trump, will personally oversee how the money will be used. At what point did he constitute himself to the secretary in charge of proceeds from oil sale? And then, of course, the energy secretary has been told to take over those vessels and transport them to U.S. ports. It's heavy crude, but they say, well, America needs it. What is the excuse that has been given by President Trump and also followed by J.D. Vance, who merely is an echo chamber for whatever Trump says, that the Venezuelans stole American oil. Now, what is the reality? This is fictional. The oil doesn't belong to anybody else but Venezuela. However, what happened is that in 1990, the Venezuelans, in 1970, they decided to nationalize their oil assets. And then under Hugo Chavez, in 1997, they went a step further by seizing assets belonging to American oil companies. Now, the matter went all the way to the United Nations Tribunal. And the United Nations Tribunal said that ConocoPhillips should be paid, I think, about $18.7 billion as compensation for the seizure of its assets in Venezuela. Now, up to this moment, Venezuela had not paid. So America saying they stole our oil is very wrong. Now, President Trump has been talking about democracy, the benefit of the people. Now, Maduro has been vindicated by saying that what America is interested in is the resources of the country. You seize their president, you take their resources, you claim it as your own, and that's why we say this is in violation of international law. To jump quickly, because it's a long literature, to the issue about how it affects the world. I said yesterday, and I repeat, the risk short-term risk is limited because already there is the blockade. And so, many of the crude oil reserves, crude oil exports meant for other countries had been suspended, even if Venezuela supplies just about 1% of global output because of its, problem. Now, America wants to take 30 million to 50 million barrels of crude oil. Trump is saying within 18 months, the oil industry in Venezuela will be revived. And he has made the point that oil price will reduce. So in the long term, because the revival of the industries in Venezuela will take about 18 months, it will take about tens of billions of dollars. But when they reach that point, there's going to be a glut, a supply glut. And when there is a supply glut, oil-producing countries like Canada, like Nigeria, will suffer. If you benchmark your budget on the expectation that crude oil price, spot price, will be about $64 billion, $64 dollars per barrel, that is going to go down. And that is why, commodity-based countries like Nigeria have to be cautious, have to begin to prepare. What has happened in Venezuela is going to affect us in Nigeria because it has turned, the budget, adrift. That, I think, is the basic point about this particular issue. Now, as for the meeting with President Goodluck Jonathan, now the National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party went to brief him as one of the leaders of the party, just as the same way they went to Baba Obasanjo in Abeokuta to also brief him about the National Working Committee that had emerged after the convention in November in Oyo State. So it was a briefing session. The major statement by Turaki SAN, Kabiru Turaki SAN, was that, look, they have an agenda, the rebirth agenda. And many of the leaders of the party were there, including former governors, former ministers, and one of the founding fathers, Professor Jerry Gana. And in response, the president, Jonathan, said he was happy that the PDP is still alive and well, and that the PDP is the only party that showed up originally in 1998 and that is still surviving. In the 2023 election, the PDP came second. And what it means is that the PDP still has structures around, the country. The fact that some governors played rogue and decided to join the ruling party does not necessarily mean that the people at the grassroots level have left the party. And that's why we keep saying that the governor defecting doesn't really mean anything. How about the people? And so what the PDP, according to Turaki, is trying to do is to revive the party, reinvent the party, mobilize that grassroots base to challenge the ruling party. Now, how far they can go with that, however, depends on the court cases that they have. And those court cases were even instigated by members of the party of an amphibious character, specifically in Nyesom Wike. And in a related development, Ini Ememobong, responded to Ajibola Basiru, Senator, Yitwada Nentanwe, chairman of the APC, complaining about Nyesom Wike. And he said, look, don't say Wike is a member of the PDP. He's been expelled from the party. And that you people created a monster, and that monster, you kept feeding it. Now the monster wants to consume you. Don't drag the People's Democratic Party into the matter. So those are the two related developments within the PDP. And it is also interesting that the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, who is now in the ADC, is saying that, the selection of the presidential candidate will be an open, competitive process. Now, everyone knows in Nigeria that he's always interested in the position of the presidency, and he has tried on different platforms. But now he's going to get a challenge from Peter Obi, formerly of the Labour Party, and Rotimi Amici, formerly of the PDP. So there's going to be competition, definitely, in the ADC. Whether that strengthens the party or diminishes it remains to be seen. However, he also made the point that the opposition is facing an existential threat because the opposition is being intimidated by, the ruling party. But the thing, of course, is that all these politicians, they are interested in power for their own purpose, but the ADC, Atiku Abubakar tells us, is committed to building a strong opposition. But we will see how all of that drama plays out. Finally, on the security matters, we'll recall that there was a certain young man called Mohammed who was arrested, and he was the one who gave information to the security agencies. I think Operation Adinkai, that, there is a cell in Borno State, in Yobe State, led by a particular person who sent them. This was after an accomplice of this young Mohammed died. His name was Adamu. And this same Mohammed, who confessed, was to go and have another operation in Yobe. I think it is very good news that the Nigerian Army, collaborating with local vigilantes and the Directorate of the Military Intelligence, have been able to arrest the masterminds of that particular heinous crime in Gamburu market when a mosque was attacked during prayer season. But we should not just hear about arrest. We should hear about prosecution. We should hear about conviction. So that this is not just at the level of media information. What is important, that anybody, whether ISIS, ISWAP, or Boko Haram, who tries to sabotage the country, is brought to book and made to face the full wrath of the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Absolutely. It's a breath of fresh air to see that we're moving from, a realm of hearing that some cases have been solved or some people have been retrieved from being kidnapped without knowing what happened to the perpetrators of those crimes. So if we're moving to arrest, that's a step in the right direction. But just to echo what Dr. Abati said, it's not sufficient. We still need to see the full process of the law proceeding so that we can be satisfied. And the reason why we continue to emphasize this is because we're struggling with we're contending with issues where we are not uprooting this issue from its from its roots. On the front page of Daily Trust today, there's a report about some kidnappings and attacks, killings that took place in Katsina. And when you go into the report, you find that 18 out of 34 of the local government areas in that state had brokered peace deals with bandits. Now we see that there's still this attitude and body language in several communities that brokering peace deals with bandits is the way to go, negotiating with bandits or terrorists as they've now been ascribed as. And we see that it's failed. It is a failing expedition. So to see that we've now moved to consistent news on a daily basis of arrest of suspects is a step in the right direction. And we hope that we can continue and we can begin to hear about their convictions and, not light convictions either. We want to hear that these people who perpetrate these heinous crimes are put away, and they're put away for a very long time. So kudos to the security officials on that. And now we wait for the judiciary to do their part. Now, let's quickly go to issues surrounding politics, because that's what's dominating the day. And it looks like what's going to be a major issue that will dominate the citizens' choice in 2027 will be legitimacy. And each of the parties right now are seeking to try and restore legitimacy or to try and reinstate their legitimacy with the polity. Now, when you look at the case of PDP and, still being reported as the Turaki-led PDP, going to see Goodluck Jonathan, of course, this is a show of force, if I may say that. This is a collaborative display that shows that this is who we are legitimate, and we are intact. It is a strong language that is being sent to the masses that PDP may have gone through challenges, but in their eyes, it is not over. However, besides some of these diplomatic optics, we still know that the existential threats are very real. Ekiti State's election is coming up. Gubernatorial election is coming up. The PDP does not have a candidate. Osun State is coming up. The PDP has a candidate. However, the chairman of the party in that state state has said that the PDP and its entire structure will back Adeleke for a second term, even though he will be running under a Accord party. So you see that as much as some of these inroads may be made sort of on the level of optics, within the party there are still massive threats that need to be resolved. The other faction of the party say that they are running under a caretaker committee that includes Abdul Rahman and Samuel Anyanwu. So there's still a lot of chaos, and they're saying that the Turaki is saying that, well, the courts don't have to determine everything, that they will seek political solutions. Well, I hope that that breakthrough will be possible for them. But when we look at parties that have had similar legitimacy crises around the world in the past, we know that it's not over. It's not over until it's over. For example, you look at the Labour Party in the UK that went through a similar crisis in the 80s. If you remember, in 1983, they released their manifesto, and it was called the longest suicide note in history. And that was because the party had reached an all-time low with factionalism, and even the public had rejected them. But they rebranded themselves into New Labour. They came back and they won 3 consecutive elections after that. However, what is going to be a key determinant is the legitimacy of the other parties. The APC have started a membership drive and a digital e-registration drive where they are trying to bolster their numbers but through digital connection with their members. That has started. In the ADC, however, as we've heard Atiku say, the road to the presidential ticket seems to be the focus for all involved right now, and seems to be the straw that might break the camel's back. Why do I say this? Because we all know Atiku's persistent ambition, and unfortunately in the 2023 election, most people say it was the spoiler. Will it be the spoiler in 2027? Well, there are also rumors and reports. Let me not say rumors. There are reports from news sources such as Daily Trust that say that the former president Olusegun Obasanjo is trying to broker some sort of an alliance between Peter Obi and Kwankwaso. And they are saying that Kwankwaso has possibly accepted taking a VP ticket in a Peter Obi Kwankwaso presidential ticket. Now, this is an interesting development. Is it something that would emerge from the ADC, or is it something that would still have to go to another platform? But what is clear is that in 2027, I don't think we can say there are any political parties. I think what we will see in 2027 are several platforms, platforms of convenience, vehicles that will take those with aspirations to their desired destination. Now, as we round up, I'll touch on Venezuela very quickly and the implications to Nigeria, just to add to all that has been said already. Of course, there is the implication on our oil-based economy. However, the other issue here is the petrodollar, because we know that up until now, Venezuelan oil has been traded in every other currency except the US dollar. Now, this particular trade, which will sit at over $2 billion, of course, is a scratch on the surface when we look at daily oil trades that happen. But if oil trade is to resume consistently from Venezuela to the United States in US dollars, that will undoubtedly strengthen the US dollar. Will it have any impact on the Naira-dollar exchange rate? Well, we've seen fluctuations in the dollar value barely impact our exchange rate here. However, the resurgence of the dollar dominance, I think, is a conversation that needs to be had, especially as countries like Nigeria seek to diversify our trade with the global south, as we seek to entrench ourselves with organizations such as BRICS that are looking to move away from dollarization and to start trading in yuan, in other currencies that will allow us to diversify our foreign exchange portfolio. Now, all of this still seems very much in the realm of theory, but when we look at the pace at which the world is moving, it's becoming very clear that the threat to the dollar economy, the threat to the dollar hegemony, is certainly one major trigger of this invasion into Venezuela, and that will now reshape how China trades, how Russia trades, how the global south trades, how even India trades. Now, also to speak on how China trades, we know that some of the things that are at threat in Venezuela are the Road and Belt initiatives, because several investments have been made, and there's also a lot of debt that needs to be contended with. Is Donald Trump going to allow Venezuela, as their colonial master, to honor those debts, or is this going to leave the Chinese budget with a dent in it? How does this affect countries like Nigeria? Well, we know that we all have bilateral relations with China, and China has several investments, and we have taken several financial what are they called? So financial facilities, excuse me, from China. How does this affect our debt profile, and how does this affect some of the developmental projects that we will be embarking on, given the fact that China is likely to also react by making alterations to their foreign policy? Well,